Good afternoon. I am Sharon Shrella. I'm the Vice President of Mechanical Turk, and I want to welcome you to this session. I'm going to be doing a quick intro to kind of give you an overview of Mechanical Turk and some of the things that companies are using Mechanical Turk for, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jon Brelig, who is the CTO of InfoScout, and he'll be covering in more detail how they're using Mechanical Turk to really do some amazing consumer analytics in terms of understanding and identifying trends in consumer purchase behavior. So just to kick things off, I'm going to start with a brief overview of Mechanical Turk. First, we're a little bit different than most of the web services in that we're actually technically not a service. We're a marketplace. And what that means is that work comes into the system. We're a marketplace for work, so work comes into the system, and we have about 500,000 workers in 190 different countries around the world who have access to a site, are registered and active workers on our site, and they choose the work that they want to work on, and many of them specialize in different types of work. And from a business standpoint, the businesses typically put work into the system via APIs, so from a business perspective, it looks like you're making an API call and a computer is returning you an answer, but in fact, a consumer is returning you an answer. So what is similar, though, to web services, other web services, is that Mechanical Turk is also just giving you access to on-demand scalable resources. The fact that we have so many workers in so many different countries means that the work continues around the clock and is really independent of geopolitical issues. So, for instance, there's recently in the news, obviously the horrible situation going on in the Philippines. That is a situation that can be business impacting, and so the one benefit of Mechanical Turk is that you're able to really have geodiversity because you're able to tap into this workforce on a global basis. And so the work really literally can follow the sun seamlessly to you. You don't have to do anything to take advantage of that. So many of the use cases for Mechanical Turk actually are combining both human intelligence, if you will, and algorithms. I mean, most of what you're hearing at this conference is all about technology and how quickly it's moving. We are not the laggards who don't see that. We absolutely see that. What we see is that there are still some things that humans can do better than computers, and that if you combine them together, you actually can get cleaner data, you can get deeper metadata, deeper results, and drive not only your existing businesses, but whole new businesses, as Jon's going to talk about in a few minutes. So, some of these, the use cases for Mechanical Turk are still, they're very broad. So, everything from translation, which obviously there's lots of algorithms out there that will attempt to translate something for you. Transcription, there's lots of, image transcription is a great one. I worked in OCR, over 15 years ago, and we were already going to be 2-3 years away from 99% accuracy on, OCR technology. We're still not there. So, and of course that gives a huge opportunity for, human intervention in the OCR process, because just because a scanner algorithm can't read the characters doesn't mean a human can't read the characters. So, but one of the big things that we typically start with is dirty data. Dirty data is the kind of the core of what drives use of Mechanical Turk. And whether that dirty data is an audio clip of a talk like this one, and someone needs to get tags around it so that they can monetize it with advertising revenue or make it searchable and provide relevant search tags, or whether it's user-generated content, which of course is pretty much integrated into most websites out there, whether it's your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook profile, the images you upload, comments on a blog. That's all user-generated content, and as businesses, we all have various policies that we're trying to enforce on that user-generated content. And Mechanical Turk is a great method for just helping people moderate that content, understanding, is this appropriate on my site or not? And that was actually a fairly early use case within Amazon, which was we needed to ingest databases from our third-party merchants. And third-party merchants, we have thousands of them on the website. They all have their own databases of products they want to sell. We want to create a really great and compelling experience, but we need to know, if you're searching for a digital camera, we want to show you one digital camera and 15 merchants that you could buy it from. We don't want to show you 15 digital cameras that are all exactly the same. So we had to figure out, are these duplicate, are they the exact same SKU, or is this a slightly different camera? Is it a kit versus a camera? We needed to understand all that stuff. And so we've been using Mechanical Turk, since pre-launch, actually, to do a number of things. That's one of them. One of the other things that we use it for is to generate metadata around products. So if we have a product that we know belongs in the cell phone section of our website, we want to know, is it a cell phone? Is it a cable for a cell phone? Is it a power cord? Is it a case? And then if it's a case, we want to know, is it a particular brand? Is it a Kate Spade case, or is it somebody else's case? And all of that really drives specifically into search relevancy, into that consumer behavior, and then ultimately into inventory turnover. How successful are the purchases? Because everybody has different metrics on what works on their website, but ultimately you only have so many chances to get the consumer to their transaction before they abandon. So our goal has always been, how do we reduce that? How do we clean the data so that we can provide the right product that the customer is looking for as quickly as possible so that we can fulfill that transaction for them? So those are some of the use cases that we've done, but there's a number of use cases that we have worked with lots of other companies on, and Jon's going to go through kind of what he's working on, but I want to highlight a few other applications that we've, are using Mechanical Turk. One of them that I think is really interesting is sentiment analysis and categorization on Twitter. So even you're seeing lots of tweets go out about AWS, about this conference and reInvent. It's very difficult to keep pace with those, understand the sentiment around those tweets, and to really understand what the content is. An example that that Twitter shared with us is that during the presidential election, they started to see this trend of hashtag binders of women. And Twitter had no idea, what does this mean? Their algorithms had no idea, what does this mean? And so their algorithms kicked it out and said, well, we need someone to define this for us. Tell us what this means. Do I put an ad for an Avery binder, from school supplies next to that? Or, what do I put next to that? So, so that was a great use case where you really need the context of what's going on in the region where this is taking place. If you had sent that to a worker, in the Netherlands, they wouldn't necessarily have known, but they were able to, obviously they have the geocoding data, so they're able to say, okay, here's a tweet, here's the social context, I can send it out to a worker with that and get that information. And that helped them in a couple of ways. One is it helps them obviously refine their machine learning algorithm, right? They are refining it. They're not going to send that out every time they see binders of women. They're going to add that into their store. And so they're, in one sense, in real time, they're acting on the information and deciding advertising decisions and appropriate moderation. Do I let these tweets go? Do I have an attack? What am I doing? But they're also improving their algorithm so that they know how to take care of it next time. But what I do find so interesting is, as with many things that go viral, they spike, and they're back down. And so putting together an algorithm a week and a half after binders of women comes out as a hashtag isn't useful. You've already missed the chance to either benefit or protect yourself from that. And so getting this very quick turnaround is really, really important. And we're seeing that more and more in businesses as there's this social dynamic of the data that runs through their systems and through their sites. One of the applications that we're seeing in addition to this is on really similar from a standpoint of machine learning, but is on search relevance. What we're seeing is many search firms are trying to obviously win the war on search algorithms. And there's this constant improvement and tweaking of algorithms. And the way there used to be a litmus test, you would send it out to a panel of users to evaluate, is this an improvement, is this not an improvement? Being able to send that out instantly to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of workers around the world and get feedback on that very, very quickly actually allows you to first have confidence in your changes, but secondly, move on to the next set of changes. So we're just seeing it really increase the speed at which companies are able to tweak their algorithms, validate those tweaks, and then move on. And so it's really accelerating the rate of change, which is exciting. So along those lines, I want to introduce Jon Brelig. As I mentioned, he is the CTO of InfoScout, and he's going to tell you how his company is using Mechanical Turk to do some really amazing things. Jon.
Thank you, Sharon. Good. So I'm Jon, co-founder, CTO of InfoScout. Check. It's got a green light. Testing. Check. Check. Good. Check. Check. Can you hear me now? No? Negative? He can hear me. He can't. Testing. Hey, we're good?
222.
We good? Yay. All right, let's try this over. So I'm Jon, co-founder, CTO of InfoScout. What we'll be talking about today a little bit, you've probably never heard of InfoScout, so give you a little bit background on who we are, how we got started, and what we're working on. Then really dive into our overall architecture. Basically, how do we get receipts from consumers and turn that into analytics and trends that are quite interesting and solve a lot of business use cases. And then really dive in deep on one part of our data flow and architecture, and that's where we leverage Mechanical Turk. I'll go over some of the challenges we've seen as we've tried to scale this out, what quality control strategies we've leveraged, and then finally kind of touch on some of the analytics that we look at on maybe either a daily or weekly basis to really get a good gauge of how our workforce is doing. And then finally give you a quick little demo of what we get to do with all that fun data at the very end of the data flow, and we've done all the work to get there. So InfoScout. I think most people assume today that if you're a brand and you sell products in the US, that you know exactly what's going on, who's buying your product, and why you're buying your product. And the stores actually provide all that information back. The reality is if you sell products today into major retailers, the data you get back is a very high level and kind of logistical level, and it really doesn't get down into that end consumer. They're powered with data such as, I know how many units are flowing through this store today, and they get those high-level logistical view. They don't really get insight into that kind of consumer level, and they really aren't able to answer who's that end user buying my products. Who are they buying it for in the household? What did they buy before my products in this category? What do they buy my product with? How do they differentiate their shopping at, say, Target versus Walmart, et cetera? So we're really here to answer a lot of these kind of business level questions and to really just measure what people are consuming and purchasing in the offline world at a household level and all the way down and kind of to the item level. So brands have had these questions for forever. And today, for the last 30, 40 years, they've turned to the major market research companies, whether it be Nielsen, IRI. And what they employ is what's called a scan panel. And what this is they send back basically 50 to 100,000 barcode scanners into homes throughout America, believe it or not, and ask those homes to scan in every single product that they buy. As you can imagine, it's a quite high friction experience. You have to scan in every product. You have to enter the coupon, what is the price. So on a decent-sized shopping trip, that can take anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes. And this whole scan panel solution has been, really operates in every major continent. In the US, it's called the National Consumer Panel. It used to be called HomeScan. And again, they track 50 to 100,000 households, and they're able to record 8,000 trips a day. So a number of problems you can imagine with that. One of them being is scale. It's a costly operation to operate. How do you really scale this out and get more data, which is quite challenging. Two is just data quality. Stanford did a large study on the data. Clearly, you don't take everything home. You consume a lot of goods on site. So a lot of the data has a lot of gaps, and there's a lot of data quality issues. So when we started the company, our whole notion is there's got to be a lower friction way to get this kind of data. And 65% of Americans are carrying around a smartphone. Instead of asking them to scan in every single product on an old school barcode scanner, just pull open your phone, snap the picture receipt, takes 10 to 15 seconds, and we'll do the hard work and get all the data. So we have a couple apps in the marketplace for the last year and a half. One's called Receipt Hog and one's called Shopperoo. And effectively, they're just incentivizing the user that when they're done shopping, pull out your smartphone, snap your receipt, and you'll be incentivized. The Receipt Hog app is you can earn money yourself. It's kind of a fun game, kind of the Tamagotchi pig style. You get a pig and you feed it receipts. But at the end of the day, you just basically cash out or, via Cash or an Amazon gift card. The second app we have is called Shopperoo. And really the incentive there, instead of making money yourself, it's all around fundraising around a cause. We're quite focused on schools right now. So the motivation might not be very motivating for me to put $30 a year in my pocket snapping receipts. But if 100 parents are doing that at my school and we're going to write a check for $3 to $4 grand to the school, that's a very different value proposition and attracts a very different demographic and psychographic set. So between the two apps, it allows us to get a kind of a user base that better represents America and kind of create that mini America, if you will. So quick overview of the data, how we get it and the whole flow. So I mentioned getting the pictures of the app from consumers. We do everything we can on the mobile device to try and ensure high quality of images. We use the accelerometer, a lot of messaging. We do limited OCR work on the device. That's actually quite challenging. But we do everything else to try and ensure a very high quality image. Great. User snaps a few photos of the receipts, comes to our server. Now's the step of taking those images and converting them to structured data, kind of JSON, if you will. Today, this is a combination of computer vision, OCR, and Mechanical Turk. As Sharon mentioned, it's often Mechanical Turk is used in a hybrid situation where you're able to use kind of algorithms and computers for part of it, and you're able to fill the gaps with human. And that human input often lets you get better at your algorithm side. So great, we've been able to take these images, receipts, digitize them, structure them, et cetera. They're only valuable if you can actually map them to the master data of the world, right? So we have a whole portion of the company that's really just actually grabbing all the products in the offline world, cleanly tagging them, categorizing them, et cetera. So we acquire data sources, we pull a lot of data off websites, et cetera, to really populate our master data. And then it becomes a little bit of the challenge is what's on that receipt, mapping it to actually the master data in the world, right? Some stores it's easier than others. Walmart, for example, the UPC is right on the receipt. Boom, boom, we can do the match. A lot of other stores, it's a bit more challenging. So take Kroger or Safeway, for example, where you just get a short description. And we have to take a look at that short description and try and map that to master data. In this particular example here, the receipt might say GAT G2 lemon lime. We got to be able to understand that and classify that as G2 Gatorade lemon lime. A lot of the technology we use there, we use a lot of machine learning classification models. And a lot of that is the same models that actually are used to do entity classification on short bits of text, i.e. tweets. So we're able to re-leverage a lot of that. Got the data, structure mapped it to master data. Obviously, we need to get into a point where we can slice and dice and analyze it. To begin, we've just pumping all that data into MySQL relational database. We've recently kind of outgrown that in terms of being able to analyze the data fast, so we've just migrated over to Redshift for kind of our data warehouse solution. Great, and then it just becomes a matter of what you want to build on top of it. At the very end, I'll show you kind of some of the analytics we're able to gather, and we just launched at infoscout.co a few weeks ago. But that's just a myriad of things, whether it be a BI solution on top of it, our own graphs, hacks, Firehose, et cetera. So we're going to dive deep on step number 2 here, which we've got outlined, which is this whole convert an image of a receipt into structured data. Very often, the image of the receipt is very clean, like the one on the left, and it's not too bad. And we might be able to leverage OCR and computer vision and really extract everything out of that pretty easily. Unfortunately, users always aren't that nice, no matter what you do, and sometimes you get a wrinkled receipt. Sometimes we'll get a blurry receipt. And sometimes we'll get a doctored receipt. I don't want to know how long that took someone to try and draw, but they tried to slip that one by us. We get it, yeah, it's fascinating. Users are fascinating. So let's talk Mechanical Turk a little bit. Quick show of hands, who here today is using Mechanical Turk? Not too often, a little bit, a couple people. A few very quick things. I'm going to use the term HIT often. It's just basically a task to be done. It stands for Human Intelligible Tasks. It's just kind of MTurk rhetoric, so don't want to lose anyone. But let's walk through that second step I just outlined before. Is we got images of receipts, we need to get it structured data. So what's the process there? When we explain the problem to a lot of people, the response, as Sharon mentioned, is like, whoa, is it OCR good enough? OCR is a solved problem for books on a flatbed scanner. It is not solved problem for images of receipts at multiple angles, contrast, wrinkled, et cetera. We do use OCR, and we're constantly getting better at it, and recently training our own kind of OCR engine on top of different kind of font types, but it's far, far from perfect. So we turn to humans, and when we say humans, it's largely Mechanical Turk, and we also have a full-time 6-person team on top of it, which is kind of our top level of quality control. So the little data flow to the right there shows that, all right, receipt comes in, let's do everything we can, auto-extract everything we can algorithmically. And if we don't get everything we need right away, then we turn to the first step, which is let's pull out the summary information. And here's where we start to use MTurk. So so here's our hit, our template, if you will, our task. It's quite simply just to pull out the store, total, and transaction date from the receipt. Seems pretty straightforward, right? No rocket science here, nothing too complicated. And this is what we use to kind of pull out and get that first level of information off the receipt. This worked great, and we had our team of 6 people who review would approve and reject these hits as they came in. So a worker completes a task. It goes back into our system. The review team says yes, 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 no, yes, yes, no. It was working quite well, but we had one problem in that we were starting to grow. Our volume was up and to the right, and we needed to be able to scale our entire flow without having to go from 6 to 10 to 20 to 40 people on our review team. I mean, one of the beauties of MTurk is it is an elastic workforce, and our review team was not elastic. So how do we accomplish this? How do we scale this whole summary transcription step, going from a couple thousand receipts a day to now we have over about 50,000 receipts a day? We turn to a strategy by Mechanical Turk. It's called known answers. And this is basically the notion that instead of just having one hit and one receipt, what we did is we bundled multiple receipts together on one task, with one of those receipts being a known input and output. So in this particular example to the right, where you see 4 receipts, one of those is actually a known answer. It's been flagged. We have someone going in and flag says these are basically our kind of our labeled data, our test receipts. And from that, we're able to synchronously, automatically, when the user submits the work, gauge their accuracy and if the hit was done correctly, just based on that one kind of input-output. It basically allowed us to really scale out with any of our own review and have this whole task completed by MTurk alone. And it's a great solution, especially when the problem and the task has Relatively simple and has a very concrete known input-output. Maybe not the best solution if it's a little bit more of a subjective approval rejection process. So the implications of this alone, this basically shows what we were paying a net cost per receipt for that summary transcription step. Early on when we launched, we were paying over 2.5 cents per receipt. The blue represents what we pay directly to Turk, and the orange kind of was representing our review costs on a per receipt level. And as you can see, very early on, we were basically approving and rejecting every single receipt, and our review cost was quite costly when you got it down to a per receipt level. So we got a little bit more efficient at that, and we would score the receipt, and we would only approve, reject some receipts. But at the end of the day, we still kind of plateaued, and we're paying about 2 cents a receipt. The data was still up again to the right, and we needed a way to scale this out, so we turned to known answers. And you can see the effect over the last 3 or 4 months. It's gone down from about 2 cents a receipt all the way down to about 1 cent a receipt. And a lot of that is we no longer have to pay, we no longer have to have review people for that. We've also been a little bit more efficient in how the worker completes the hit. Because they're doing multiple one of them at once, they don't go from doing a Walgreens receipt to a Target receipt to a Walmart. We're able to bundle those together, so they're doing 6 Walmart at a time, 6 Target at a time, which it allows them to be a lot more efficient. So we actually reduce this kind of a double whammy, and we're able to go from 2 cents to 1 cent per receipt. Okay, so we got the summary information in the receipt. The real value of our data and the real value of our company is actually what's kind of item level information. A lot of companies out there do get kind of merchant level or account level, either be your credit card companies or what have you. Getting that what's called item level, it's called level 3 data, is the real value and what's really challenging to get. So clearly we want to pull all the items off the receipt. At this point in the flow, we already know what store it is. And therefore, we're able to really present a very customized template to the worker based on the store. The Walmart template is going to be different than the Target template. It's going to be different than the Walgreens template. Maybe not even visually, but from a validation side, it will be. We've done a lot of work on the template to really do live validation, meaning as they enter, when they click hit, it doesn't just get sent to Turk and approved, and then we reject it later. We're able to hit our server automatically via AJAX, if you will, and warn the worker if we think something's wrong, right? They enter a UPC at a price $199. We know from our data that that UPC should not be $199, it should be $9.99. They might have fat fingered it. We can warn them synchronously. Keep in mind, workers may hate rejections worse than you do. They thrive by having a high approval rating. They want to do it right. They're not trying to skim by you. They really thrive, and it opens up their ability to do higher skilled and higher priced tasks. So they take their approval and rejections very seriously. So doing everything you can, whether it be in instructions or live validation, so they do it correctly, is a win-win. So we have this team of 6, again, that sits there and kind of does our highest level of quality control on top of our entire Turk workforce. We can't afford to have them review every single one. We just have too much volume. So we do kind of confidence scoring based on the input of Mechanical Turk and score the Turk output, the Turk result. Some of the features we use to score that is we compare what we pull from OCR to what they entered. We compare what they entered versus our master data. We look at their worker history and their worker tenure. Are they a good worker in the past? And out of that becomes a confidence score that we use to then judge, should we approve or reject this hit? So that worked, and it is working. However, our data is still up and to the right, and we need to find a way to scale that. I prefer not to have to scale out our review team again to 10, 20, 30 people. So how do we continue to scale our quality control? The itemized extraction is not the best use case in our example for known answers. It's not a concrete input-output. There's a little subjectiveness to it, especially depending on some retailers. Also, it's a little bit more complicated task, so we can't really use the same strategy we did for the summary step. So we've started to turn to a strategy called Plurality. And this is just this whole notion of having multiple workers do it. And this is very common in crowdsourcing and Mechanical Turk or other crowdsourcing platforms. It can achieve very high quality. It is generally higher cost. You obviously have to pay 2, 3, 4 workers to complete the task. And for us, candidly, we can't have every single full itemized hit done by multiple workers. So we only flag those receipts, those output from the work that we think is low confidence. They entered 5 items, OCR says there's 10 items. Okay, it's low confidence, let's have another worker do it. So then we publish it to worker B. We then compare the results. If they look good and they're the same, we trust it and continue on. If worker 1 enters 5 items and worker 2 enters 10 items, something's wrong, then we send that to our review team. So we're really trying to scale out and make our review team more efficient here. Again, there's a lot of strategies around plurality, a lot of crowdsourcing options. You do it for every single hit. It's a way to achieve very high quality control. You are paying for more, so it can be a little bit more costly. It all depends on your use case. We'll go over some of the metrics that we really look at. We either want to be on a daily or weekly basis, just kind of get a pulse of our workforce. At the end of the day, you have these hundreds of people doing work for you. You need to kind of measure either is your work in demand or is it getting completed on time. Here's one in particular, which is basically a hit acceptance latency. Once again, a hit is just a task to be done. So you can see for most of the time, our work that we publish out there is done within 60 minutes or an hour or 100 minutes, which is quite important for us, especially because it affects the user experience. Keep in mind, a user snaps a photo of receipts. They want their coins and points as fast as possible. So if it's 2, 3, 4 days, that starts to affect the user experience and really is an experience we can't afford to have in order to grow. So this kind of outlines, again, we're sitting well under an hour of hit acceptance latency. We did some changes to the template in June, and boom, the hit latency spiked. All of a sudden, there was not any more demand for our work, or for our work to be completed. What we did was we just basically made some changes to the template, added too many questions, realized that there was no longer demand, went and tweaked the template back, and eventually got quickly back down to kind of the acceptable hit latency for our use case. Another thing I want to point out is really how much you rely on retained workers. You are building a workforce. It's not like most of your work is being done by brand new people that come in. The idea is for good requester, you stay out there, you build a workforce. And for us, within about 2 months, as you can see, the orange line represents what % of our work was being done by retained workers. Either over 80% of our work was being done by workers from the previous months. How workers generally operate is they get acclimated to either a few requesters or a few templates. They load up mturk every day. They go search InfoScout, Brelig, receipt, whatever, and they do that every day after day after day. So you really are reliant on this reoccurring workforce. This is another graph representing some of the same stuff. This is kind of the Pareto of worker volume, so the 80-20 rule, if you will. Over 80% of our hits are completed by just about 500 of our workers, which only represent 5% of our total workforce from the number of unique workers. So the 80-20 rule really definitely applies, if not 90-10. So kind of went through that pretty quickly. What I want to show you now is we do all that hard work. We get the users to submit the data. We transcribe it, digitize it, map it to master data, get it into a data warehouse. What are some of the cool things we can do with that? And I'll actually kind of pull up some of the dashboard stuff we actually just recently launched. If you're familiar in the web analytics space with maybe a Quantcast or Compete, it's quite similar. Just replace it with the offline world. So replace websites with brands or retailers. See who's shopping there, what are they buying with. So let's take, we'll just go to Red Bull. So we know Red Bull is purchased by males that are young, traditionally low income, pretty decent brand loyalty. Only 19% would have purchased another brand if the item was out of stock. Clearly used in urgent need situations, convenience stores, etc. Bought at food and everything else. One fascinating item is we're able to pull the payment method off the receipt. So in this particular use case, food stamps. Red Bull has bought over 3x index on purchase by food stamps consumption, where Monster does not, which is kind of actually fascinating because Red Bull is the premium of the energy drink brand. Food stamps, you wouldn't assume that, right? check out a few others. Open it up to questions. Old El Paso, salsa, right? Like New York City. One of the things that's fascinating is just diving into this. So it's kind of middle-aged, middle income, is very popular in the Caucasian community, not very popular in the Hispanic community. So just the data. I don't know if that represents how good the salsa is or not. I'm just showing the data. A few others on the retailer side and the store side. So like Trader Joe's. I know people often think Trader Joe's is an economical option. It's very cheap. Trader Joe's leans quite high income, actually. Very, very high income. Educated, high income, popular in the Asian community. Males go there by index more often than females as well. So these are some of this is kind of this is the data at the very end of the funnel. This is just tip of the iceberg, some of the stuff we can do with it. Ideally you want to be able to hit mail, you want to filter by this, you want to slice by that. And this is something we just released for free. You get 5 dashboards for free a couple weeks ago. So with that, I went through that pretty quick, but I'd like to open it up for questions, just whether it be MTurk or our business at large.